Story 1. They are following the exact line that Walz wants, showing support for citizens and calming tensions while avoiding a direct conflict with immigration and customs enforcement that could prompt Donald Trump to federalize them. The absence of weapons and masks, together with the addition of high-visibility vests, signals a desire to interact positively with citizens. They are the adults in the room. Story 2. The leaders of the Minnesota National Guard have made it clear that if they are called to serve in the area, they will be there to protect civilians. They live among these people, their neighbors, friends, and relatives. So it does not surprise me. Story 3. I went to the Whipple building intending to meet the guard and give them some snacks. I expected to see them guarding the building entrances along with the state troopers, but I was surprised not to find them. When I went to the mutual aid table to drop off some supplies, I noticed the family of medium tactical vehicles across the parking lot, behind the protest line. I spoke with a National Guardsman, told him how grateful I was that they were there, and gave him some snacks I picked up from Costco. The tone has changed significantly there. The optics of the National Guard at our backs are not lost on me. I really feel like they literally and figuratively have our backs. If any National Guard members are reading this, thank you again. Story 4. I serve in the Minnesota National Guard, as do many of my friends. We are Minnesotans. We love the state and the people who live here. Story 5. The National Guard acts as a buffer to minimize contact between you, immigration and customs enforcement personnel, and civilians, reducing the risk of further brutality and murder by undertrained personnel. Story 6. That is how the military is supposed to operate domestically for disaster relief. Story 7. Minnesotans who serve in their state's National Guard want to maintain positive relationships with fellow Minnesotans, some of whom may be literal neighbors. Story 8. It was needed after everything. Watching people who protect us do their jobs and smile instead of wearing masks made me break down in tears. Story 9. Show compassion and understanding. People need sustenance regardless of which side they are on regarding any issue. Story 10. Hopefully, this is a move that informs other governors about how to protect their people. Story 11. I am sure every immigration and customs enforcement agent deployed in Minnesota right now is a little worried about an army of trained soldiers following them, monitoring their actions and reporting. Bovino being out of the picture will take them down a peg. He had been making them more agitated. Almost all of the negative footage that has surfaced was recorded by citizens. The Guard is not only there to protect and keep the peace, they are also there to witness events and record them in official reports. Story 12. These are people placed in an extremely volatile situation and asked to act like adults and calm things down. They will be highly visible so immigration and customs enforcement knows they are there, and handing out these items tells residents that these people are not their enemy. These are de-escalation tactics and they show that people know what they are doing, unlike the Gestapo wannabes at immigration and customs enforcement. Story 13. Showing goodwill and treating people with dignity is a great way to de-escalate a tense situation. It also signals who is on the right side of history. Story 14. What is the difference between a trained army and an army of George Zimmermans? Story 15. The military is made up of our sons and daughters, our moms and dads. The administration is trying to separate us from them. They will not let us down. They are one of us. Story 16. This is a clear example of the well-regulated militia clause of the Second Amendment. It shows why preventing federalization of National Guard units is important, provided you can trust your governor to put the people first rather than personal interests. Story 17. They are there to bear witness and, hopefully, to suppress government tyranny against Minnesota residents. They are the true law enforcement alongside local police and other agencies. Story 18. It is an obvious public relations move with a good purpose. To show Minnesotans that the National Guard's primary mission is to protect them. Story 19. They are trying desperately to calm the mood and restore faith in government, at least at the state level. Story 20. Personally, I think that wearing reflective yellow, being unarmed, and generally smiling is even more effective. The protesters seem very well organized with a system for sustained presence. The powers that be keep thinking they can reduce protesters' visibility with threats, beatings, and even cold-blooded murder, but it seems only to double the protesters' resolve. Story 21. I think it is good that they are doing what they signed up for, protecting the American people and refusing to follow illegal orders from the Nazi army. Story 22. National Guard soldiers serve as nurses, civilian contractors, police officers, firefighters, emergency medical technicians, students, teachers, electricians, and other roles. This is their state and their community. They are properly trained and have sworn an oath to serve the people. They are held to a high standard, receive individualized training, and are subject to the Uniform Code of Military Justice. They can be trusted. Story 23. Better than spraying them with mace, gang tackling, and murdering them. Story 24. They are Minnesotans in a terrible position. The protesters are neighbors, friends, and family. The people who have been beaten and murdered could be people they love. Compassion and kindness can go a long way. Story 25. I saw they were handing out cocoa, but it did not have mini marshmallows. That is not going to end well. Story 26. The governor requested only the Minnesota National Guard because they are fellow Minnesotans. Story 27. At worst, it's pro-police propaganda. At best, it's helping citizens instead of the Gestapo when push comes to shove, and we all know who is initiating it. I'm a bit cynical, so I think the latter is unlikely. Story 28. I strongly applaud those who choose to serve their state's population and uphold the Constitution vigorously and loudly. Story 29. Stop calling them anti-immigration and customs enforcement and start calling them pro-Constitution. Story 30. The National Guard reports to the governor. Immigration and customs enforcement reports to the president. The National Guard is trying to help its members. Story 31. They are adhering to their oath to protect and defend the Constitution rather than acting as jackboot thugs. They are defending Americans from enemies both foreign and domestic. Just because they have badges does not make them right. Story 32. That their leadership is made up of people who remember that we are all human. Story 33. Former National Guard member from outside of Minnesota with riot control experience. I see it mainly as a public relations move intended to help de-escalate. The main purpose of riot control and civil disturbance control is to protect state property and state officials. Most of our training focused on preventing crowds from reaching the point of extreme violence by dispersing people to reduce mob mentality. We took orders from local police, but training varies between states. Another important point is that one main reason people join the National Guard is the community aspect. They are your neighbors and fellow Minnesotans. Being activated is never a fun experience. They do not always like what they are doing, but when they enlisted, they wanted to help. Story 34. The National Guard serves domestically during disasters to help and protect the public. This is a Trump-made disaster that attempts to justify worsening the situation by murdering protesters rather than being a natural disaster. Story 35. Fantastic public relations and an excellent de-escalation strategy. When I say public relations, I do not mean that it is insincere. I think they really do want to help. In the videos I have seen, they are smiling with their eyes, and that is hard to fake for long. Story 36. This is a textbook psychological example used repeatedly to alleviate tensions with protesters. For those who study how protests are managed, one pro tip is to feed and hydrate protesters. It is hard to direct your anger at the hand that just fed you. None of this comes from the goodness of anyone's heart. It is a practical measure to keep protests peaceful and to quell militant elements. Story 37. Smart move to break down the barrier with the people and build a positive image for the new government from the get-go. Whoever thought of this should remain on the public relations strategy team. Story 38. Community support in times of crisis is one of the primary responsibilities of National Guard units. They consistently train to show up and support the people of their state and beyond in times of need, not to perform crowd control or to patrol parks. Story 39. Manage the crowd, distribute snacks, and build positive relationships. Story 40. De-escalation beats enforcement when tensions are already high. Story 41. They are letting people know which side they are on. Story 42. The best practice in a hostile situation is to de-escalate. They are doing it well. Story 43. National Guard members are our neighbors. Doctors, dentists, lawyers, garbage collectors, teachers, and cashiers are among them. Minnesota is their state too. Story 44. They are decent humans who know immigration and customs enforcement is shit, and Trump's agenda is anti-American. Story 45. I think it's smart and the right thing to do. They are setting themselves apart, both visibly and in their actions, from immigration and customs enforcement. Scrolling through the comments, many people raised good points. It humanizes the Guard and the protesters, and it makes immigration and customs enforcement look bad by comparison. The Guard support citizens, hand out food and drinks, and are someone to turn to if anyone sees that agency doing something questionable. Because they are from Minnesota, they are serving their own people, their neighbors and friends. Story 46. I am going to go against the grain here and say it is more pandering and feel-good tactics. This has happened before in Minnesota, and it was 6 years ago. Everyone thought it was over. The last few weeks show they were wrong. Until those who swore the oath actively oppose violations of the Constitution, it is all just going to happen again. People have died, and their killers are not going to face justice. This is not a victory. It is a distraction. Story 47. Finally, a government agency that understands the only way to truly pacify a crowd is with free snacks. It's the hangry defense strategy. Story 48. The primary role of groups like the National Guard in these situations is to maintain a calm environment. Chaos tends to increase tension and can lead to violence, injury, and even death, especially where poor training, confusion, or ill will are present. Small acts that keep the peace prevent large outbreaks of violence in such environments. Story 49. If United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement is allowed to continue detaining people, there is still a problem at the leadership level. However, guardsmen having goodwill toward citizens is still a good thing. Story 50. It looks more like de-escalation than endorsement. Keeping people fed and hydrated helps lower tension and prevent the situation from becoming chaotic, especially in an emotionally charged context. Story 51. They are doing so while clearly identifying themselves and wearing high-visibility vests and uniforms. This is how government agencies are supposed to present themselves. Even if they engaged in crowd control, they could be held accountable, and I believe they want to show a better way to deal with protesters, unlike the massively militarized, armed, masked personnel of the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Story 52. Very nice. A good message to convey that we are lowering the temperature. We are not your enemy. Story 53. I think it is very clear that they are there to calm things down. That is a good start. Whether that means they will actually prevent immigration and customs enforcement from committing further violence or not is anyone's guess. Story 54. It is good for now, but if President Trump federalizes them, this could turn into 4 dead in Ohio very quickly. Story 55. They just want you to share in the glory of army coffee. It tastes like soap. Story 56. This is a smart gesture of goodwill that will hopefully keep protesters on the National Guard side. It would be quite a contrast if immigration and customs enforcement were chased out of town while citizens baked cookies for the National Guard. We will see, though. The National Guard is essentially going to be used for crowd control, so conflicts with protesters are likely. Story 57. It was asked 12 hours ago and is still one of the top threads in this subreddit. Story 58. Just doing what they swore to do when they joined. It is as simple as that. Story 59. It is a publicity stunt, not in a bad way, intended to demonstrate that the protesters are not violent and that the National Guard is not there to terrorize. It is a community of people, not the narrative the Department of Homeland Security seeks to promote. Story 60. While many argued they could not activate the National Guard because that was what President Trump wanted, the National Guard was activated and Bovino was fired the next day. Republicans began denouncing immigration and customs enforcement, and there were rumors that Governor Noem would be fired as well. It appears those who have been urging activation of the National Guard for the past month were correct. Story 61. I think it helps keep morale high and makes people feel like something is being done. Story 62. It is just a way to try to rebuild a modicum of trust. I doubt it is any deeper than that. Story 63. I would say it is better than shooting them over the past few weeks. Story 64. I think it's pathetic. It's basically saying that citizens will have to fight immigration and customs enforcement on their own, while others will only watch and hand them water. But what else are they supposed to do? Attack immigration and customs enforcement and start a civil war? Story 65. I think we are seeing two separate groups with almost diametrically opposed training and priorities. The MNG swore an oath and put in the work. The ICE swore to who knows what and seemingly learned nothing over the course of 47 days. Story 66. It's a good first step. They should turn to face the other way, ready to defend them. Story 67. Trying to defuse tensions so citizens do not interfere with immigration and customs enforcement terrorizing their communities. Story 68. It is a strategic de-escalation tactic. From an optics perspective, they are separating the state National Guard from immigration and customs enforcement to show they are not the enemy. From a crowd control perspective, it is psychologically harder to throw bricks at someone who just handed you food and water. This effectively calms the protest without using force. Story 69. Military propaganda, trying to get people to lower their guard for when the National Guard returns. Story 70. Winning hearts and minds, just the opposite of the Gestapo. Story 71. They are employed to protect the American people and Constitution. Story 72. It was communicated in English and I understand it, so no interpretation was necessary. Story 73. I think they know these are good people who are upset about what Republicans are doing to this country, and most likely they will not obey orders to support immigration and customs enforcement. Story 74. I think coverage of the National Guard being federalized ignores why the administration sent defective wannabes. The cover story is immigration law. The actual mission is to cause trouble and commit violence. The orders cannot say that, so they sent undisciplined hooligans who are guaranteed to run amok. They will follow unwritten orders. The National Guard, on the other hand, will follow written orders. They will not go beyond those orders because of their professional and personal values. If the administration wants them to commit the kinds of crimes that immigration and customs enforcement is committing, it will have to write those crimes down explicitly. I do not think that will happen, and if it does, it will be a clearly illegal order. Story 75. If protesters are cold, tired, and hungry, they are more likely to become angry. Providing them with water and food reduces the likelihood of chaos. Story 76. They are supportive of the country and the community they are sworn to defend. Story 77. They want to be clear that they are there to help and not to stir up trouble on behalf of someone who does not like their governor. Story 78. This is what peace officers do. Good community policing. Story 79. NG probably does not want to do harm where it eats. If they interfere with the community, they will have to live with the consequences. Story 80. This whole story has me very confused. I want to fast forward a month to see what happens when the dust settles. Story 81. It's fine, I guess. Who gives a fuck? People are dying. We need to abolish immigration and customs enforcement now, not do little publicity stunts like handing out cookies. I know the National Guard can't do much at the moment, but the whole National Guard handing out snacks thing feels like an order to improve public relations. Story 82. I don't trust them after 2020, and I suspect a PR move, but Minnesotans tend to be helpful. Story 83. It is a blaring megaphone, screaming that some masked people stole uniforms to play operator. The high-visibility clothing was a loud statement. We are not the immigration and customs enforcement clowns, and we also brought snacks. Walz served as a guardsman, so he understands the public's relationship to the military and how critical that trust is. Trump was finished the moment the military refused to help during his first term. He can flail, whine, and break things, but he does not have the overwhelming violence to actually hold power and force the populace to back down. No matter how much surplus they wear, immigration and customs enforcement is not the military. All his terror campaign has done is get bored liberals to start posting about federal agents, and it may have even upset the National Rifle Association, according to rumor. These people have no idea how the institutions and power structures truly work. China had to run people over with tanks. Trump can barely get them to stand around courthouses. He needs mass violence and practical extermination to terrify the populace into submission. He does not have the means. Immigration and Customs Enforcement killed 2 people, and the public is about ready to lose their minds. It is not going well. Edit. Oh, boohoo doomers. Bite me. Story 84. Placation. Do you think concentration camp prisoners are afforded such kindnesses? Story 85. I view it as an escalation by Minnesota state authorities. They want United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement to know that armed, likely better trained personnel can intervene quickly if necessary to prevent situations from getting out of hand. Story 86. Keeping the peace. They are protecting Immigration and Customs Enforcement by staging outside the agency's main building. Story 87. I love this. Someone in my family is in the National Guard and understands patriotism more than these you. Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers posing as urban cowboys. Many service members are unfairly labeled as right-wing extremists or gun fanatics. The true extremists are not representative. They took an oath to the Constitution, love our country, and many stand with the protesters. Not everyone in uniform is bad or corrupt. Some are, but most are decent people trying to do a very difficult job. Story 88. It is entirely optics. They should have been deployed to protect the public long before 2 white citizens were murdered in cold blood by literal Nazis. Story 89. Not as much as I would like to see the National Guard arrest United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents or at least detain them. Story 90. I would rather have seen them take up arms and hold a line against Immigration and Customs Enforcement Nazis. Story 91. It is encouraging to see de-escalation techniques being used after masked, unidentified men executed people in the neighborhoods. Story 92. It is nice to see American citizens treated like humans. This is a stark contrast to what we have seen in the past week. Story 93. It's a brilliant move, to be honest. It calms things down and shows that the Guard supports the right to protest while remaining present should anyone cross the line. Story 94. The National Guard is probably the people's literal neighbor. More sanity is expected. Story 95. In my opinion, that is dark but kind of true. To be honest, the Gestapo were definitely professionals at what they did and terrifyingly efficient. Story 96. The Minnesota National Guard is looking out for the safety and well-being of Minnesota residents. There is nothing to interpret. That is their job. Story 97. Their goal is to protect and de-escalate. It is a low-cost visible signal that they are different from the other heavily armed groups in the city, similar to why they wear high-visibility vests. They want to be seen as friends and neighbors who are here to help, not as additional force to people who have been traumatized. Story 98. The video I saw seemed unconvincing. It did not seem like they were near a very large protest. Are there more videos? Story 99. A loud and clear fuck you to the regime. If they were federalized, they probably would not obey Trump. Story 100. I was honestly impressed, and it really gave me a glimmer of hope. Story 101. The military cannot assist with civilian matters. It is only present in a limited role. Claims regarding the Insurrection Act were rejected by courts in multiple states. The military is well funded, and training is not skimped on or ignored. Story 102. I loved it. It showed they were not the enemy of the protesters and brought a little calm amid the chaos. A literal peace offering. Story 103. The easiest way to diffuse aggression and build trust is to break bread together. It is ancient and instinctive. Providing food, comfort, and safety to protesters makes it much less likely they will be targeted with aggression if tensions rise and shows that people care for their community. These people are spending time in the bitter cold. They probably need something warm to eat and drink. Story 104. There are a few possibilities. First, they could be doing what they can as a show of solidarity, most likely. Second, it could be a public relations stunt to make the governor look good, possibly. Third, it could provide a cover to position forces to defend Minnesota against the Gestapo without raising suspicion. This is least likely but most tactically sound. Time will tell. Story 105. They are the big brother if immigration and customs enforcement storms at us, as they do in every engagement. They keep our citizens safe with a bigger stick while handing out snacks. That is the best move Minnesota could have made. Story 106. Basic competency from someone who believes that law and order means something other than masses cowering and allowing those in power to act as they wish. Story 107. Anyone who has served in the military knows the concept of hearts and minds. You try to bring the local populace to your side first. Story 108. It is basic de-escalation tactics, a psychological operation. They are visually demonstrating that they are not immigration and customs enforcement agents or other federal law enforcement. They are controlling temperature by handing out donuts to reduce hostility and direct the crowd's anger toward immigration and customs enforcement rather than the National Guard. Story 109. It is definitely a complex situation. I think it is great that they are helping with food and water, but it also raises questions about the role of the National Guard. Story 110. The military and National Guard are not a monolith. Anyone claiming the entire armed forces would turn on the public if the Insurrection Act were improperly used is spreading fear and doubt. Story 111. They are citizen soldiers, properly trained and disciplined, and they understand they are there to help the population. They are leagues above the violent, undisciplined immigration and customs enforcement officers who believe innocent civilians are terrorists. Story 112. If it weren't ridiculously cold right now, I would say it is politicizing the troops. However, in my humble opinion, during bad weather like we have now, passing out food and warm drinks is exactly the kind of thing they should be doing. Story 113. One striking point is that most of these National Guard soldiers are very young. They are placed in a role of great responsibility and intense scrutiny, and may have to confront federal agents who commit abuses of power or act unprofessionally. They may also have to manage violent protesters while trying not to appear supportive of immigration and customs enforcement and thus become targets themselves. Story 114. It may blur the lines between federal and state authority, but I'm not sure how federal and state laws interact. I understand that federal law overrides state law, while states retain certain rights. Can a lawyer explain this in plain language? Story 115. If they are with protesters, I think it is really good. If they are with activists who try to disrupt operations, it is asking for trouble. I doubt this will be the case. Story 116. Hi there, neighbor. The governor assigned us to keep you safe from those people over there. Stay behind us and we'll protect you. Yell anything you want at them. We're thinking it too. Story 117. It reminds me of the early days of the Vietnam War, before the United States committed ground troops. The Army of the Republic of Vietnam Command hated casualties. You could not get promoted if your operations resulted in casualties. So their usual method of recovering a village from the National Liberation Front was to wheel out the artillery and flatten the village from a safe distance. Then the National Liberation Front would come out of the forest to bury the dead, treat the wounded, and repair the damage. That is one reason why they won. Story 118. That is some fucking Barry Weiss-level framing of the situation. Story 119. An important and necessary presence is a good symbolic gesture. I hope it helps de-escalate the situation while sufficient political pressure finally removes the roving gangs of armed thugs from the streets. Wishful thinking, but God, how much worse do things need to get before people wake up? Story 120. Go for it. But if one of those protesters is impeding United States immigration and customs enforcement, that agency is going to spray them with chemical agents, use tear gas, and arrest them. The National Guard will not do anything about it. If the National Guard does intervene, there will be chaos. Story 121. I will not trust it. This is the same National Guard that used horrendous violence at Standing Rock. Story 122. I agree. A non-threatening presence can defuse tension quickly. I wonder, though, where the line is between effective de-escalation and appearing weak to bad actors. Public trust seems fragile in situations like this. Story 123, remember, everyone. The system can be good and reasonable. I will accept it. If we must have the system, it should be beneficial and act responsibly. Story 124. It was probably the only decision that could produce a reasonably good outcome given the circumstances. The soldiers would not have united against the people, and morale was already low, so siding with immigration and customs enforcement would not have been effective. If they had engaged in open conflict with immigration and customs enforcement instead of sending a subtle message, it would have given the current administration an excuse to declare martial law. It was a wise move. Story 125. They are presenting a masterclass on de-escalation. And Story 126. It seems appropriate. Assisting the state in times of crisis is what they are for. Story 127. They are simply doing what they are ordered to do without regard to politics, like good soldiers. Nothing more, nothing less. Story 128. I think that is great. Protesters opposed to immigration and customs enforcement should be supported. Story 129. A guard handing out coffee and donuts was presented as an act of de-escalation and community safety during tense anti-immigration and customs enforcement protests. Story 130. Did the National Guard destroy food and water stations during the 2020 Portland, Oregon protests? Story 131. They are in a difficult position. The president presents one narrative, but they have taken an oath to protect the Constitution. They are doing their best. Story 132. I hope they are willing to provide protection from immigration and customs enforcement to the protesters. Story 133. I think the National Guard should always side with the people. Story 134. I worked at a large company in Minnesota in the middle of winter, and it gets dark early. My tire went flat, and a coworker saw it when he was leaving for lunch. He came back inside, asked around until he figured out whose car it was, asked for my keys, went out in his work clothes, and put on my spare tire. I was 21 and had no idea how to do that. I asked him why he helped, and he said, "Well, you can't go out in the dark after work and take care of it." He was also a Minnesota National Guard member. Story 135. They are offering rewards for information about the Epstein files. Story 136. They are there to keep the peace. That means protecting federal buildings and immigration and customs enforcement personnel from violence, protecting the community, and doing outreach. I would rather my tax dollars go towards small comforts than murder trials. To be honest, I think they should treat immigration and customs enforcement the same way. Some coffee and donuts, and knowing the National Guard has their backs if things become violent, might take the edge off those egomaniacs and calm things down. Anything to de-escalate. Story 137. Do not be mad, comrade. Here is a coffee and a glazed donut. I hope this makes up for the federal agents killing one of you. I am a federal agent. Now behave or else. Story 138. It is risk management. Hungry and angry people act irrationally. Giving them snacks helps keep the temperature down. Story 139. I am suspicious of the motives of everyone except for the people. Even then you have to watch out for plants. Story 140. This shows who the real Americans are, and it is not the hired thugs of Trump. Story 141. It shows they have empathy and compassion, which immigration and customs enforcement officers lack. They seem to shoot first and ask questions later like bad police officers. Story 142. This is a small show of solidarity with citizens and, even more so, a clear expression of disapproval of the heinous acts committed by immigration and customs enforcement. I wish more government authorities would take action. This is not meant to detract from the National Guard's work. I think they are doing important work, but we need clearer, more obvious signs and actions from authorities that show we will not allow citizens to be murdered. We need more than snacks and water. Someone needs to step in and start protecting people, whether that is a judge, the police, or a governor. Story 143. De-escalating a tense situation fosters trust between citizens and law enforcement. It would not be bad for this to become the norm, to be honest. Story 144, it is sweet, but if immigration and customs enforcement is going to keep doing this, there must be a point when they pick up their rifles and say no. Story 145, aid and protect versus intimidate, brutalize, or worse. It seems the Minnesota National Guard got it right, doing the job they actually signed up for. Story 146, it is genuine peacekeeping, promoting peace and connection. You are unlikely to see them as an escalation when they serve the community openly. Story 147. What is this question supposed to mean? It is absurd. Story 148. Kindness is the hallmark of liberalism. Cruelty is the essence of conservatism. Story 149. I like to interpret it as a glimmer of light and humanity in an otherwise cold and dark time in our collective history. Story 150. People in Minnesota. If you were making a list of needs right now, would coffee and donuts be in the top 5? It doesn't feel like the National Guard is being effective. It feels performative. It seems like a joke to have highly trained soldiers serving coffee and donuts. I get the symbolism of being on our side, but fuck, step it up. Can't they go to detention centers and make sure people aren't dying? Edit. Unless they are exercising the privilege of their full potential, it looks like a performative distraction. Postscript. I am in California. This is my outside opinion. Story 151. More performative behavior, which is what Walz and Frey have been doing for years. Story 152. They are the Democrats of the army. They exist to make you believe there are good people on the road to fascism. None of it means anything until they disobey orders. Story 153. I think everyone sees that the tide has turned. Trump is spiraling down the drain. Story 154. I think the decision to have them wear high-visibility vests signals that they are wearing a different uniform from the others, so we can tell them apart. The coffee and donuts are there to introduce themselves to the community. Story 155. Would you want that interpretation in Lebanese or Farsi? What is this artificial intelligence asking? Story 156. It made me pretty proud, not gonna lie. The army was out there leading the way. To me, they're showing support for their people, and I have nothing against it. Story 157. Counterintelligence Program 101. Good cop, bad cop tactics to pacify us and prevent any change. Story 158. They should give out Snickers. Fewer hungry, angry people would likely mean less violence. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.